Can you show an example of creating a conceptual framework for something? Yep, absolutely. So I will create a conceptual framework for anything that you want me to. Just give me a topic. Well, someone gives me a good topic, I'll just use a junk one, which is the causes of acute abdominal pain that I went through before. So a way that can be categorized and simplified and made into a conceptual framework is I'm asking the question why. That's the question that I really want to ask. I want to make it so that it's not new information. So if I've got acute abdomen, appendicitis, and bowel obstruction, I don't want that to be three separate things. I want to be able to think of it in the same way. Like, how can I simplify it to the point where it's like, this is really kind of talking about this thing? And so there's a number of techniques we can use. We can create analogies, which force us to simplify and abstract on information in a different way. We can just categorize and group the information, which is effective sometimes, not always effective, because making groups doesn't necessarily mean that you have created groups that are logically bound together. You may have created a group, for example, that's in the same area of the body anatomically, and that's okay as well, because it's a way to help you memorize it. But that's very different. You have to understand that's a memorization aid. And that's a different way of thinking to conceptual frameworking, which is you're grouping things together based on them sharing the same cause of things. So you're still going to end up memorizing something. For example, if you have 10 different things that are all different inflammatory causes, those will be, things that you can learn, like you can rote learn inflammatory causes, and then you can divide that into 2 or 3 other subsections, and you can rote learn that. But actually, it's much easier to retain that than something that's just arbitrarily rote learned, because it is logically connected together. So as an example, with this acute abdominal pain stuff, I can divide this into, let's say, all the causes that are inflammatory, and then all the causes that are inflammatory because of infection versus a non-infectious cause of inflammation. So something like appendicitis, biliary cholecystitis, diverticulitis, or the itis is gastroenteritis. All of those are inflammatory. So I would group those together, and then I'd find a way to simplify that even more. So, okay, appendicitis, cholecystitis, diverticulitis, gastroenteritis. So there's infection ones that are causing. So infection can cause both in this situation. So in here, I might just imagine an abdomen and just go in order. And that would be a way of me kind of memorizing it. So things like this, anatomy, where especially situations where method of loci can be used, the categorizations end up being a split between the concepts versus the rote learning. But if I were to use, because no one's given me a topic yet, if I were to use like pre-med material, like, I don't know, cells and tissues, for example. Well, there's the idea of like form is equal to function, and then you can conceptually map out that you have got things that are thin versus things that are thick. You have an idea of why certain things need to happen. Okay, so like if you've got skin, you can logically think through, okay, what's the function of skin? Therefore, what is in a need? Therefore, what provides that? And therefore, what are the variations? So you're running through that kind of, this causes this, and therefore this causes this, and therefore this causes this. And you're working through that chain, and you're trying to group as many of those chains together as possible. It's really hard to actually demonstrate this without actual material sort of in front of me. But when I do the study with me, I'm very happy for you to link me anything, and I'll just learn it on the spot and show you how I create a conceptual framework out of it. It's surprisingly very difficult to explain this without actual specific examples. But the idea is that you are grouping things in terms of the common why. So I call it linking through why. What about something that's typically not conceptual? So, for example, posterior forearm compartment extensors and their nerve/blood supply. Any way to make this conceptual, or is it largely memorization? It is, okay, it's both. So in the initial stages of learning, it's going to be largely memorization. As you learn more and more about it, as you apply the knowledge more and more, it will become more and more logical because you have more things to connect it to. So, for example, posterior forearm compartment muscles might be just whatever, but when you go and observe an operation and someone has, let's say like flexor compartment carpal tunnel syndrome, and then you're worried about something. So you're going to test for whether they have paresthesia or affected nerve sensation in different types of areas of the hand, because you realize that the nerve travels through a particular fascial sheath or something. Now, the fact that the nerve travels there, it makes sense because you had to look for that in the examination. So this is kind of how you create the logic for it. Now, it's really difficult to find those connections for everything you're learning the first time through, which is why a lot of it ends up being rote learned. And then in retrospect, you go back and do it. So things like anatomy, a lot of that will end up being rote learned, but you should still try to find the low hanging fruits of conceptual understanding by linking it to clinical cases, situations where you apply the knowledge, and just in general situations that require you to not just have known it, but use that knowledge for some kind of purpose.